Hi, welcome to 40 Under 40 Live. My name is Kellie Thorn and I am the beverage director for Chef Hugh Atchison. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, and today we are going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, brandy, and more specifically, we're going to do a little 101 on Armagnac and Cognac. And just to let you know, I will answer any questions you have at the end, so start thinking some up. Now, both Armagnac and Cognac are from the southwestern region of France. Both of them are grape brandies. They're both of great economic significance to their respective regions, and they're both highly regulated by their governing bodies. However, the way that they're produced varies pretty greatly, and even though they're both made from the same raw material, the end result is pretty different. So Cognac is located about 75 miles north of Bordeaux, while Armagnac is about 100 miles south of Cognac in the region of Gascony. The Armagnac region actually started distilling before Cognac, but their location is not as geographically beneficial as Cognac. So where Cognac kind of from the onset began as an export, Armagnac was a more locally enjoyed spirit. However, as brandy is becoming a larger category, people are more interested in it in general. We're seeing both of these spirits start to gain a lot of traction, which I think is great. It's really exciting. As I mentioned before, these are both made from grapes. However, the grape varieties used do differ. In Cognac, Uni Blanc reigns supreme. About 98% of the vineyards are comprised of this grape. There are 6 grape types permitted in total, but Uni Blanc is the main grape that you see. In Armagnac, you can use 10 different grape varietals, but there are 4 that are important. Uni Blanc is there, but in addition, there's also Folle Blanche, there's Colombard, and there's Baco. Now, the soils that these grapes all grow in, again, are very different from one another. And even within the Cognac region, it's broken up into 6 different zones or crus. You have Petit Champagne, Grand Champagne, Borderies, Fin Bois, Bon Bois, and Bois Ordinaire. And the soil types within those regions are pretty different. Now, right in the center in Petit and Grand Champagne, it's predominantly a chalky soil. And these spirits are considered to have a lot of finesse and a lot of elegance, but they also tend to take a longer time to age. As you move further out into the crus, you start to encounter more limestone, more clay, and finally a good bit of sandy soil when you get to the near the coast. Now, the Armagnac region is divided into 3 different regions. You have Haut Armagnac, where you don't actually see a ton of production there, and then Bas Armagnac and Ténérez. Now, in general, the soils in Armagnac are much sandier, but they do have little like bits of clay. There's more clay in Ténérez than there is in Bas Armagnac, but in general, the soils here produce, again, really just beautiful, elegant spirits. Once we start growing these grapes and harvesting them, and we turn them into wine, and then eventually it's time to distill them. Now, in Cognac, by law, pot distillation is required. These types they must be copper, they must be directly heated by a flame. This type of distillation requires a batch distillation, so there's 2 distillations that take place. Now, in the case of Armagnac, though pot distillation is allowed, about 95% of all of the distillation is actually done in a single column continuous still. Now, these stills by law must also be made of copper, and they are also directly heated. There are some plate restrictions in there, but as the name kind of hints, this is done in a single distillation. So it's pretty different. Now, in Cognac, once we've distilled the spirit, all spirit comes off the still as clear, colorless, and dry. That's in any spirit's production. We age them. In Cognac, this is required by law. Any spirit that's put out into the market that's called Cognac must have been aged for at least 2 years in oak. The oaks used in these 2 regions are very different. In Cognac, you see Limousine oak, which is oak from a natural forest. These trees tend to grow at different heights and ages, and they have a wider grain. So the spirit gets to interact a lot with the oak here. A lot of oak or tannin extraction, as well as like lots of other compounds that give these spirits kind of their defining qualities. Vanillins, baking spice, things of that nature. There is also another oak called Tronçais that is permitted, or oak that comes from the Tronçais forest. Now these forests are timber forests. Interestingly enough, they were actually planted by this teetotaler named Jean-Baptiste Colbert, and he planted this forest to produce timber for Louis XIV's royal fleet, for warships essentially. And now they're being used instead to make cognac. And I say make brandy and not wars, so that's pretty cool. Now the oak in this region, or from this forest rather, tends to be, because it's a timber forest, they're all the same age, they grow at kind of the same height, and so it tends to be a tighter grain and kind of a softer influence on the spirit. Now cognac houses use both of these spirits, sometimes, woods, sometimes they'll use them one exclusively, but often they're using both. Now in Armagnac production, you will also see a lot of Limousine, but there is an additional oak called Gascon oak, and this oak has an even more tannic characteristic than Limousine does. However, due to lack of natural resources, you're starting to see less of that, and Limousine's definitely kind of taken over in the aging, but there are still plenty of producers that are using Gascon oak as well. So, as I mentioned before, in order to be called cognac, that spirit has to go into the barrel for at least 2 years. And when you see a bottle of cognac that says VS on it, that means that the youngest spirit in that bottle is at least 2 years old. And that's the youngest that you're going to see come out of the Cognac region. After that, 4 years is, if you see VSOP on the bottle, that means that it's at least 4 years old. And XO denotes that it's 10 years old. In Armagnac production, something that's kind of unique to this area is that they're actually allowed to release an unaged Armagnac called Blanch Armagnac. And these things are, this is a really cool spirit. It's very nerdy. I urge you to definitely hang out with one if you can find them. And when I say unaged, it actually means that they are hanging out in an inert vessel for about 3 months legally before they can be released. And this really allows a mouthfeel to come together and for the aromatics to really develop before they put it out on the market. After that, a VS in Armagnac is at least 1 year. A VSOP, just like cognac, is at least 4 years. XO is 10, and Hors is 15. Now, these are the youngest spirits allowed in these bottles when you see these aging requirements. The fact of the matter is that both of these spirits benefit greatly from extended aging periods, and both of these spirits, the producers rely heavily on blending. So even though you'll see something that says VSOP, it might be that the youngest spirit in there is 4 years, but there is a good chance that there's a blend of many different ages in there. Think of a blender as kind of creating a symphony of flavors and spirit, or flavors and aromas in a bottle. They're going to use sometimes hundreds of different eau de vie, sometimes 10 or 20 to kind of get their desired flavor profile at the end, which is part of the reason that these spirits are so special. And the longer that they age, the more integration of oak you see, the more development of fruit flavors, of flower flavors. You start to get these really deep notes. Sometimes it develops into a phenomenon we call rancio, and these are kind of marked, these flavors, after very long extended periods of aging. You start to see things like mushrooms and soy sauce and forest flora, just really complex and cool. So when you start to take little elements of that and blend it with eau de vies that have really bright fruit flavors or really interesting oak characteristics, you can kind of get this really complex spirit in front of you. And that's what I think of with brandy. I think of it as a journey in the glass. It's an experience. You can kind of really sit down with one of these spirits and spend some time going through the different aromas and flavors that you get because of the fruits, because of the flowers, the spices from the barrel, and then later on the further development of fruit character and integration of oak. Because of this broad spectrum of flavors, This makes these spirits so much fun to mix with. I love making cocktails with brandies, with cognacs and Armagnacs specifically, because there's so much versatility. If you like things that are bitter and boozy, or lots of oak characteristic and vanilla and baking spice, you want to stir it into a Manhattan type cocktail or a old fashioned. Vieux Carrés are a great example. These spirits do really well with that because of their oak aging and their spice. If you want to mix them with fruit juices or make sours with them or anything like that, it's really easy to do that as well because of all the fruit and florality that shines in these spirits when you make things like sidecars. Even something as simple as an Armagnac and tonic is really special. And I highly recommend that you kind of broaden your horizons in that respect. I mean, cocktail history has shown us that brandy once played a huge part in our classic cocktails, and I think that it still rightfully deserves a place in your home bar and in your cocktail regimen. So today, I've kind of chosen some spirits for us to taste through that give you some examples of the regions and their subregions. The first one that we're going to taste is the Chateau De Pio from the Ténérez in Armagnac. I love this spirit because it's really powerful. It's got great oak characteristic. It's kind of spicy. They're using both uni and full blanche. And again, because of the clay content in this area of Armagnac, there's really beautiful, bright fruit characteristic as well. This is a 10-year-old spirit, so there's really started to be some great integration, but still a lot of great spice also. And when I go to taste a spirit, obviously smell is so important. So first I kind of hold the glass here, I allow the aromas to come through, and that's my first analyzation of what I'm about to get. And then the first sip I kind of allow to coat my mouth when I'm doing this in a scholarly way. And then the second one is when I start to really evaluate what's taking place in the glass. The family that produces this spirit has been in this region for 300 years, so I think they may know a thing or two. So delicious, so bright. Again, a little drying, a little spicy, a little oaky. Now, over in the Bas Armagnac, we have the Dart de Galang. This is also a 10-year-old spirit. I think it's really cool to do comparative tastings where you can taste two different regions, and especially when they're in the same age range. Dart de Galang has been around since 1813. It is storied that they are the oldest Armagnac producer in this area. Something to note about Armagnac distillation that I maybe didn't tell you before is that the stills that they use are historically traveling stills, and so this house has their own traveling still, but they would service several different producers. And they're also really efficient stills. The wine that's destined to be an eau de vie is also the coolant that goes into the still, so I always just think that's really a neat thing about them. And then they typically distill each grape varietal separately from one another. So the Bas Armagnac, the Dart de Galang, again, XO, so 10 years minimum aging. And the fruit here is really present as well, but you're getting like kind of darker, deeper fruit, a lot of almond paste here, and a lot of like anise characteristic that I think is really cool. Again, I'm gonna go in for a smell first. There's also some distinct notes of Rancio that are starting to kind of come through here, and some like great forest flora notes. It's so neat to just taste the two of these side by side. The one from Ténérez has a little more like apricot characteristics to it, also nutty, also great oak. But then you come over here to this one, and again, it's just a little bit almost like figgier, plummier, but they're both really beautiful spirits. So now we're going to jump over to Cognac. We're going to go back up north and hang out with these guys. This is the Jaune Filleau This is the La Poyade. This is named for their estates. This is a fully estate-produced cognac. They grow their own grapes, they distill on site, they age on site, and all of this is done with a father and son. I was lucky enough to visit this house, and they're just really special. I love the Fio cognacs. This is a VSOP, but it's actually about 8 years old in the bottle, and I think that this might be my summer cognac. It is so bright. It has so many like honeysuckle, jasmine notes to it, really bright fruit characteristics, some golden raisins, some apricot here, a little pear, just really floral and lovely. Something that you could drink over ice or even just like a little soda water and a twist of lemon. I don't hope they're not like upset with me for recommending to mix it, but I do think that the possibilities are endless with this spirit. It's also just a great one to bring to a dinner party. You're going to be everyone's friend. The thing about these spirits is because they're wine-based, they have so many unique characteristics, but they're also really great with food. I love these, like especially a young cognac popped in the freezer and with little potato chips and caviar, or something like foie gras, something like this with like a creme brulee at the end of the night would be awesome, especially if it has like some like fruit preserves over the top. So don't discount the ability to pair brandy with food, by the way. Finally, we are going to taste the Bourgogne cognac. Now, this is really cool because all of these spirits in front of us, and just in general, Cognac and Armagnac, I mean, they're very traditional. They've been producing spirits in these regions for the same way for hundreds of years, and respect for that. That's amazing. But it's cool to see that there's some young producers out there, some people who are forward thinking and innovating and doing some kind of neat things that you haven't seen too much before. In the case of Bourgogne, this is a 22-year-old spirit. It's aged in French oak, but you know, at the very ends, they finish it in these 10-liter little micro barrels that have been charred with alligator char. It just like kind of texturally, the impact is like texturally unique. Now, this spirit is 55% ABV, so beware. Maybe mix it with a little water. Maybe don't chug it, but it's so, for being 22 years old, for going under the kind of like aging regimen that it has, it's so bright. It's almost juicy. I mean, it's just got tons of fruit characteristics still. I love that this also comes from the Bois region. My hands are shaky. It also comes from the Bois region. This area where they're growing these grapes are they're known for producing these kind of faster aging spirits and really fruity. And I think that shows here. The fruit characteristic is very bright and really, it's just not necessarily what you would expect coming from a spirit that says it's 22 years old and that it's finished off in these alligator chars. But it's a really unique expression of cognac. And I definitely, along with everything else on this table, highly recommend it. Ooh, but it has a bite to it, for sure. So I think we have some time for questions at this point. So, hey Brian, the ideal serving temperature for Cognac or Armagnac, I mean, I think that it's been interesting. We'll actually talk a little bit about glassware too. So you heard me mention before about keeping Cognac in the freezer. And I do that with young Cognacs or with like Blanch Armagnac because by doing this, you kind of, it gives it this like insanely silky round texture that is so pleasant. And then because they have like kind of bright fruit characteristics, it's just like, I mean, it's refreshing. It's really nice. In general, you know, I'm kind of blanking a little bit on exact like what the degrees would be, but you know, typically we taste spirits at about room temperature when we're first tasting something. If something's too cold or too hot, it prevents you from being able to really taste. I will say that I, in general, do not recommend like heating brandy or anything along those lines. I think that you're going to kind of lose a lot of the more delicate aromatics if you do that. But at the same time, however you feel like you would best enjoy it. However, when I'm tasting a spirit or analyzing it for the first time, I'm going to taste it neat. Yeah, what temperature should they be stored at? Hi, Amy. You know, again, heat is not the friend of spirit, just like it's not the friend of wine. You don't need to store these as you would a white wine, but I would recommend like cellar temperature of red wine, or just keep them out of the sun. They will fall out of condition if they're exposed to a lot of heat or a lot of sunlight. So I don't recommend that. But you know, a cool, like your cool, like cabinet in your bar, don't put them on your patio. What is a good bottle on a budget? Hey, Kat. So actually, it depends what your budget is. There are a lot of producers right now who are producing spirits that are specifically designed to be mixed with in both of these categories. And those are going to be like the H. by Hein VSOP. They created that along with a lot of bartenders, and kind of did a blend that specifically is ideal for mixing. And even though that's a VSOP, I think it will still fall in like between the $30 and $40 range. I will say that when you start to consider the amount of aging that goes into a lot of these spirits, they're actually a great value across the board. So it's spending like $50 to $70 on something that's aged for 10 to 20 years, compared to what we're being charged for some pretty young spirits because of demand right now. I think it just depends on what you view as value. But if you wanted to do a younger, like brighter, inexpensive VS, of any of these, I really recommend the Trécor from Bosch Gabrielsen. Their VS is really lovely and bright, and that's going to be relatively inexpensive, and most VSs will be. And that goes for either category. Armagnac is a steal, though. I mean, this is a 10-year-old spirit that's in the like below $50, which is amazing. So. Yeah, should you serve these in a particular glass? You should, but you know, ultimately, hi Marina. So there is a glass that's very specific to brandy. It is a tulip. We don't have one here today, but it's a little bit smaller, and you can kind of look it up. It's a brandy tulip. These glasses are essentially designed to really like push aromatics up towards your face and towards your nose. The thought process is that when you have a glass that's really big, you kind of like, they start to kind of fall away. And so you want something that kind of directs up, just like you would a white wine or a glass of champagne. Actually, these have worked out really nicely, and I often taste out of white wine glasses or drink out of white wine glasses. But I'm gonna be honest, Cognac and Armagnac are gonna be really delicious no matter what you drink them out of. So if you wanna drink them out of a rocks glass or a snifter, feel free. Are there any cognac cocktails? Hey, Greg, yeah, there are. You know, historically, as I mentioned before, brandy has actually played a huge part in our cocktail culture. If you look at books from pre-Prohibition times, they're like riddled with cognac cocktails. In fact, Jerry Thomas uses cognac in his mint julep rather than whiskey originally. And if you've never had a cognac mint julep or an Armagnac mint julep, I highly recommend it. You also have a sidecar, which is a sour with lemon juice, Cointreau or orange liqueur, and cognac. Again, mixing something like the simple mixed drink. One of my guilty pleasures is actually brandy and apple juice. That's like an airplane flight, don't tell anybody. But in Vieux Carrés, the brandy old fashioned. I mean, yeah, there's tons of brandy cocktails classically. And then I think that if you have a bartender that you really trust, put yourself in their hands and let them make you something awesome. What are the main grapes in both? Hi, Jerry. So again, in cognac, there are 6 grapes permitted, but the dominating grape is Uni Blanc. That's 98% of the vineyards there. They were that was the grape that reestablished the vineyard post-Phylloxera, and it still kind of dominates. So that's 98%. Uni Blanc is also known as Trebbiano. And in Armagnac, while there's 10 grapes permitted, there's 4 that are important. Again, Uni Blanc shows up there, but there's also Fol Blanche and Colombar, which are also both in Cognac, by the way. And then one that's really special to just the Armagnac region is Baco. What is an eau de vie? Hi Beth, how are you? You know, eau de vie, simply translated, means water of life, but what we think of as eau de vie is unaged brandy. So this can be made from any fermented fruit product, and then doesn't see oak aging of any type, but it can be made from any kind of fruit. So when we talk about eau de vie in Cognac, we're talking about unaged grape brandies before they go into barrel, but they can be made from pear, raspberries, all of them. Oh, I'm being told that's all the time we have. Thank you all so much for joining me today. You can follow me at Kellie_Thorn on Instagram. That's Kellie with an IE and Thorn with no E. And I hope that you learned something today, and I hope that you will go forth and drink lots more brandy. Thank you.